Hello and welcome to Janet's Craft Corner. Today we're going to be making 3 of our snowman ornaments. The supplies you need are shown and then listed in the description. Please take this time now to subscribe by clicking the red button and the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. I've organized my pieces by color on my tape board. If you don't know how to make a tape board, see one of our Technique Tuesday videos. These pieces up here are red. This is a dark blue, galaxy blue. This has got a gray background. These are light green, and there is a light and dark green stripe. These are orange carrots. All of these are black. And then you can see I've already got my white done except for one piece, which I'm going to show you how to do the sponge painting with. The advantage to sponge painting is that when you do the painting with the sponge tips, you get a much lighter coat and the engraving will show through on those pieces. So to paint with a sponge, I a lot of times use a quarter sponge, but today I'm going to use a half sponge. You're going to dip your sponge in the paint, and you're going to then kind of offload it on your palette because you want it to have very little paint loaded on that sponge. And then you're going to press the sponge very lightly onto your piece. You want to keep a really light touch. This is going to put a light coat around, but the lighter your touch is, the less likely it is to go down into the individual pieces that are engraved. And then this will help your engraving show through. Now to paint the rest of her colors, I'm going to start in the upper left corner of my grid, which makes it so that my hands don't get in the way of the, don't land on the pieces that I've already painted. And because these are so small, I'm going to again use sponge painting, but this time I'm going to use a quarter sponge and go through and paint these items. That'll keep the edges of the items from having a lot of paint on them and having to be touched up. Now we're going to go back and touch up our white. The white requires multiple coats, especially with the sponge painting because there's such a light coat. And with white, it's very important that you let it dry completely between coats or you'll end up seeing little splotches. That's why I usually do most of my white on Monday of each week, but I wanted to show you how to do the sponge painting here. As I'm painting here, I just need for the white to go up underneath the edge of that place where the brim of the hat is going to go, because the brim of the hat will touch it, so I don't have to worry about my black and my white meeting. Now I'm going to paint the dark blue on the background of the Snowman Can Melt Your Heart. And on that one, I don't need to paint quite as far down all the way to the end. I mean, I can, but I don't need to since it's got the white piece that goes on the tip of it. Having a little trouble getting you some paint here. Let's see if we can't do a little better job. Shake it down. There we go. Okay, we're going to use a brush to paint this, and we're going to paint, when we paint with a brush, we always want to paint from the inside of our piece out towards the outer edge so that we don't get a lot of paint on our outer edges, and therefore we don't have to touch them up using a marker or a paintbrush and the black paint at the end. And that makes it easier and quicker to paint products. Now we'll do our black pieces. For our black, we have the tops of the two hats, plus all those little buttons and the brims of our two hats. And again, remember, we don't have to come down and actually meet our white. We just have to get low enough that the brim of the hat will cover it. Okay, that finishes that. Now let's do our gray background on our other ornament. And on that ornament, on that background, we want to use, again, the sponge technique because of the letters that we want to shine through. Again, I'm going to use a half a sponge because it's a large area rather than the quarter sponge that I normally use. Here you can see just how little paint is loaded on that sponge when I use it for sponge painting. It's really important that you offload as much paint as you can and then use as light a touch as possible to keep it from going down into those engraving marks. And you can see I am going around kind of the edges of that snowman outline and not going all the way to the bottom. And that's just, it's preference. You can do it if you want, but it's going to be covered by another piece. So why bother with doing those areas on the this piece? Now we'll paint the lighter of our greens. The tree and the two pieces here are all done in that light green. And then we're also going to paint the stripes on our striped scarf. Stripes are kind of harder to paint than most things because you can't do them in individual pieces. You're going to see I'm going to use a very small brush to paint the stripes, and I always paint the lighter of a stripe first and the darker of a stripe second so that it can cover up any mistakes that I might make. The other thing is you can use a marker on those, an acrylic paint marker, if that is a better way for you to do it. So I look at this, I've decided that I think I want my tree to be my darker green. I think that light green is just a little too light for our trees. So I'm going to do it with the darker of the two greens. And then I'm also going to do the stripes on the scarf, just like we did the stripes earlier. Okay, and now we'll do our brown. The only place we have brown is on the trunk of our tree, and obviously if you don't want to worry about the brown, you could just paint it green. It won't really matter, but it's a very small area and a very small brush will get it really easily and quickly. The reason I use a brush on this instead of a sponge is that to get that line to be sharp across there, a sponge just doesn't work well. So I use a brush on this to get that sharp line between the trunk and the tree. Okay, and now we're going to do our orange. Our 3 carrots are the only orange we have, and we're going to use the sponge technique on these carrots because they've got little marks in them that kind of have to do with making it look like they're got more dimension, I guess. Okay, and that is all of our painting. So now we're going to get them pulled off of our tape board, and our tape is sticking really good today. I used to use a standard Scotch painter's tape on my paint boards, and I actually use my paint boards multiple times before I replace the tape. So you do get a lot of stickiness from these. Now that we've got them all off, it's time to start gluing. I use Precision Art Craft glue, and I really like it. When you buy it, you can buy an 8-ounce bottle with the tip, with the small bottles. As you can tell, my tip got clogged, so I'm just using a straight pin to push down in there and unclog my tip. I'm really bad about not getting my lids back on quick enough to keep it from drying out a little bit. But the first time you buy it with the package that includes the 3 little bottles and the funnel to fill them, and that gives you these really fine little tips. And then after that, you can be a little cheaper by just buying the 8-ounce bottle and refilling. I think there actually might even be a 16-ounce bottle. And you just put glue on them and line them up. And the reason I love this glue is, as you can see, I kind of adjusted that once I had it on there, and it works really great. But it holds great, but it gives me a few minutes of time that I can do movement of the piece so that I don't have to be perfect when I lay it down. I know some crafters, some companies use 3M backed wood, but the problem with that is when you put it down, there's not much movement. You can't, slide it to get it where it really needs to be. And I'm not very good at getting it in the right place at the beginning. As soon as I lay it down, I usually have to slide it a little bit. So I like using this glue better than I do that 3M product. You notice these little buttons are slightly different sizes, so just make sure you get the right sized one on the right piece if you're making all of the pieces at the same time. I can show you just how well that shines through, the engravings shine through when you use the sponge technique. Okay, I just realized I used the wrong scarf on the wrong piece. So I'm going to pull it off, and it's been on there a little while, and you'll see it's going to probably pull off some paint, but we can solve that problem. Yeah, it did pull off some paint on the white, as you can. Now, sponge painting this does not give me enough coverage because I've now got some little divots in that. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to actually use a brush to paint it, to fill in those little, I don't know, they're not really holes, but rough edges. And what I'm going to do is just go over all of the white on this piece and make that, using the brush all around all these other pieces, and just make it kind of lumpy like snow would actually be. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this, but let me show you. See this? That's the really smooth. And then see how there's kind of a lumpy, a bumpy texture to this one. So it works either way when you're doing the painting of the snowman. And so now let's I'm going to touch this up a little bit with the red, because when I pulled the heart off, it pulled a little bit off of this. But I'm using the sponge, and sorry if I'm off the screen right now. It's hard for me to see it, so I need to get it close to my eyes. But I'm just using a sponge to do this one because it didn't pull very much off. I pulled it off pretty quickly. And now I'm just going to put the pieces on as they should have been put on the first time. And I've got a little bit of the white paint on the back of the piece, and it's okay. It doesn't really need to all come off, but some of it was going over the edges, so you're going to end up seeing it on the other piece. And so I made sure I'm making sure to pull off those parts that go over far enough that you'll be able to see it underneath that piece. And like I said, this is what happens when you're not perfect with what you do. I'm never perfect. You just adjust. and I'm doing great today. I just realized that I also forgot to fill in the little coal pieces for my mouths on 2 of the pieces, I guess. They're not on all 3, I don't think. I think one of them's got X's. Yeah, the one's got X's. I use a acrylic marker to do these, and it's just easy to fill those in. You could also fill them in easily with a stylus or the end of a brush doing the dot, kind of the dots technique. And now that I have recovered from the things I did wrong or forgot to do, we'll finish gluing our pieces on and we'll have these done. And there we go, and you now have all 3 of the ornaments finished, and you have the full set. And as you can see, those weren't too bad to do, and I looked at my back there, you can see I've got a little bit of stuff around the edges, so you can actually stain your backs if you want. I usually don't mind them looking like that. You don't really see them on the tree, and they aren't supposed to be handmade ornaments. So hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back soon and watch other videos that we do for you. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.